So, ministry and evangelism, my goodness, it can look so different in so many different contexts and people groups that we are trying to reach. And one very specific group that I love as a college athlete is athletes. And I umpire baseball games and I played sports. And it's definitely a group of people that need to know about Jesus in a unique context in which we can minister. It's also fun when some of these athletes that people are reaching are people that we might know and we might talk to. And so today is going to be a really fun conversation. My guest joining me, Reza Zadeh, and he's going to be talking with me. He is the chaplain for the Denver Broncos. If you don't know, that is the NFL football team from Colorado. And he's going to be talking about just his experience, his story, the ways that he ministers to the players on the Broncos. And hopefully my goal is that this would encourage you to go out to make disciples and the people that are in your context. Hopefully it would be exciting to you as you see other people kind of faithfully living out their calling and the calling that God has on their life. So Reza, thanks for coming on and chatting with me today.
Ryan, thanks so much for having me, man. It's exciting and love what you do, and so I'm looking forward to having this conversation and
Yeah,
and talking about this.
absolutely. Super excited. You know, Reza and I kind of go way back in a sense, knew him from a long time ago.
Yeah,
And we're going to hear a little bit about his story. He actually officiated my brother's wedding. And so a little
that's
bit of a
right.
connection there, but doing some awesome work. So Reza, let's just kind of jump right in and we're going to get to kind of the practical stuff I know that people want to hear about when it comes to professional athletes and all that kind of stuff. But your
Yeah,
story is unique. Kind of where you're from, your heritage and you growing up a Muslim, then you going to play college football at Colorado State University, accepting
yep,
Christ through an athletic ministry, and now you
yeah,
working with that same athletic ministry, reaching out to other athletes. So can you kind of give us a history of kind of what has brought you to the point that you're at now?
yeah. Right. So, man, actually, my full name is Ali Reza Zadeh. But when we came to the United States, we quickly figured I better shorten that name, or else I'm not going to have any friends. But yeah, we came to the United States when I was young, just like a lot of Iranians that came over in the late '70s, early '80s because of the revolution that happened. And so we were in the United States, and my dad, his job transferred him out here. I believe by the hand of God, transferred him out here before the revolution actually happened. So I kind of grew up in the States. I spent most of my life in Southern California and South Orange County is where I grew up. And man, I would say this, Ryan, I just I didn't know how to fit in. I had no idea. I mean, literally I was it was almost like I was an alien. My green card said resident alien, and I might as well have been a resident alien because we didn't know the language. We didn't know the culture. So it was just kind of this figuring out life and even
Mm-hmm.
growing up. But I did end up, I did grow up in a Muslim household, like a lot of Iranians when we came to the United States. But I would say over the years, my parents started seeing some things, some inconsistencies in Islam,
Wow.
especially because of what Islam has done to their home country and their native country.
Yeah.
And so over the years, they kind of waned. But I mean, we were still, if anyone asked, hey, we were Muslim, it wasn't just our faith, it was our culture. And that's true with
Yeah.
a lot of Middle Easterners. I mean, it's your culture. And I hearken it to, a lot of Hispanic culture is very Catholic and may or may not be a faith they practice, but it's a culture. And so that's kind of how it became for me. And then ended up, going to junior college in Southern California, played on a team. We did very well, won the junior college national championship. And
Wow.
a bunch of us went to a whole bunch of different schools. I didn't get recruited, so I walked on at Colorado State. And it's there that the Lord totally changed my life through this ministry called Athletes in Action, and just people who have given their life away to serve athletes. And because some people took a chance and built a relationship with me over the course of a number of weeks, I started saying yes to Jesus, and I became a follower of His.
That's awesome. And so, after that, sometime after, right, graduating, you become a pastor. You pastor for a number of
Yeah,
years in Northern Colorado, as well as then joining Athletes in Action as staff, kind of working with some universities. So I'm kind of curious to
yeah,
hear maybe the difference or similarities between kind of being on staff as a pastor and then kind of going to being a chaplain over university sports teams as well as the Denver
yeah.
Broncos.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I did, when I was in college, I was discipled. We have an AI staff person. And man, he is still in my life. He's still a mentor and a father figure spiritually to me. And he discipled me all through college, walked me through what does it mean to follow Jesus. And a lot of it was information, but more than that, I mean, I actually lived at his house with him for a while and saw how he parented and how he was a husband. So it was more life on life
Mm.
discipleship. was actually a coach for a couple of years. Was a graduate assistant football coach, and I thought for sure that's how I was going to impact the kingdom, was going to be through coaching. But the Lord very quickly made it clear that I just was supposed to go into ministry, and I can't explain it. I literally I didn't want to go into ministry. I specifically remember, this is what I remember. I remember saying when I became a Christian, I was like, okay, God, I'll become a Christian, but please don't make me like these other people. Please don't make me go into ministry, you know? And then when I was going to go into ministry, when I finally made that decision going to ministry, I kid you not, Ryan, I said this. I said, God, I'll go into ministry, but please don't let me work at a church. I don't want to work at a church. I want to do athletes in action. And but the Lord had other plans, obviously. And so after I was done coaching, there was a local church that I started attending, and they had just built this new building in a college town, and they'd never had a college ministry, and ran into the senior pastor. And this is interesting, Ryan. Actually, the way that I got connected with him is there was a family in town that was leading this Bible study of a bunch of teenagers, a bunch of middle school kids, seventh graders. And they run a mountain adventure camp up in Estes Park, Colorado. And they said, hey, in the summertime, would you stay at our house? And would you just keep this Bible study going? We have this Bible study going for all of our, they had triplet boys and an older son, and said, hey, would you keep this Bible study going throughout the summer while we're up at camp? And I was like, man, free place to stay for the summer, I'm in. Ryan, that Bible study at the beginning of the summer started with like 12 kids. By the end of the summer, we had 48 kids. And here I am, 22 years old. I have no clue what I'm doing. I've got 48 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14. I mean, probably broke every single youth ministry rule there is, because I had no idea.
That's the advantage of not knowing, is you don't know when you're breaking them.
Yeah, you don't know when you're breaking them. You can still get in trouble. But by the grace of God, I was protected by that. But it was literally the senior pastor's daughter was actually a part of that group. So that's how he'd known me. And so I stepped in. So he invited me to say, hey, we are looking, we just built this building. God's moving. We have all these college students. Would you consider being our college pastor? And I looked at him and I was like, no. I was like, first of all, I've only truly surrendered walking with Jesus probably about 3 years. Never been to Bible school. I don't even know what it means to be a pastor, to be honest with you. And I'll never forget, man. He said, wait a minute. He said, let me ask you a couple of questions. He goes, do you love God? I said, yeah. He said, do you love people? I said, yeah. He said, Reza, I have heard you share your testimony. I've heard you teach. We can equip you. We can train you. You can go to school. And so literally a week and a half later, I came on staff, and, I actually entered into there was an online hybrid Dallas seminary program that I did where I was online, but then I went down to a church in Colorado Springs for in-person classes. So I got a theological degree that way. But yeah, so I pastored in a local church as a college pastor. Then we planted a church. And then my wife and I just really sensed that, man, I love the local church, but there was just something, to be honest, I just felt like, I just kind of felt like locked in. Again, local church is great. We're part of a local church. I'm on a teaching team of another local church, but I just know for me, I needed to be out there and I needed to connect with people. And there's just something about athletes for me that I was an athlete. I speak the language. I understand athletes. And I just say, man, they have such a platform. And if I want to reach as many people for Jesus, then I got to invest in my life in others who actually have a bigger platform than I do. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I stepped into this thing, man. And you asked the question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's so funny you sharing that story, because, my high school year, right? The school year just started this week. I just finished day 2 with my students. And so I'm telling them a little bit about me. And my story was, after my first year of teaching, it was like, well, first of all, I'm never going to be a teacher. I'm not going to teach, even though the school was asking me to teach. And then my first year, I remember my principal saying, most teachers go back to the United States and continue teaching. I go, that will not be me. And now here I am starting my 11th year teaching high school. And it's amazing how many times you say, I'm not going to do something. And then you end up doing it.
Bro, do you think it works if we just ask God, hey, not to give us $1 million? Do you think that'll work?
Maybe that's a trick. What is that? Where you,
Lord, don't trust me with it, please.
Yeah, I think it works on kids, right? And I don't want you to eat your vegetables. No. So I'm kind of curious because you talked about this idea of
Yeah.
stepping into the pastoral ministry, really feeling ill-equipped. And I feel like there's a lot of
Yeah.
people, maybe some even listening here, that they kind of feel that, like they want to be used by God, but they just feel like they're not prepared, they're not ready. I mean, what can you kind of say maybe to encourage those who want to be used, who want to step into
Yeah.
different discipleship roles, but just feel like, man, I'm just not ready for this?
Yeah, that's a great question because you hear the cliche, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I think in a lot of ways it's not just a Christian cliche we use in ministry. It's really true. I think there's this idea that somehow has popped up, and I'm in a parachurch organization, Campus Crusade, which is now called Crew. Athletes in Action is a part of Crew. There's almost like this picture of like, ooh, if I can only work at a church, like working at the church is like the pinnacle of Christian work.
Hmm.
And from what I understand, like back in the day, that's how missionaries were. Like, man, if I could just be a missionary, that's the pinnacle of Christian work. I've got this phrase that we use, and it's the simplest little phrase, but I lead a group of businessmen. I've been leading this Bible study, these businessmen now for 10 years. It started at the church plant, and we've just kept meeting, even though I'm not the pastor there anymore. We still meet 10 years later. And we continually say, just do what's in front of you. Like that's become our motto in them, like do what's in front of you. Like, they say, hey, I want to make an impact for the kingdom. Okay. Your employee is struggling. Just do what's in front of you. And so I think that's what I would say is just do what's in front of you. And there's some advantages I think to the idea of like, yeah, just come on board, we'll teach you everything. Like I get that, being sensitive to the Holy Spirit, but I do think that there was some grounding that I missed in not fully understanding what the call of pastor was at the time.
Hmm.
But I would say for people that would say, hey, I just want to be used right now, I'd say just do what's in front of you. Like there are right now in our neighborhood here, I don't even know how many. My daughter's 12. She's about to be 13 in a couple of weeks. And, she's in seventh grade. There's like 9 other seventh grade girls here. Now, I don't feel totally comfortable leading a seventh grade girls Bible study, but I work with college students. But I've grabbed some, be like, hey, if we feed you every Monday night, would you just come over and we'll even give you the curriculum? And I don't care what the curriculum is. Would you just spend time
Hmm.
with these seventh grade girls and just talk about Jesus and
Yeah.
let them see a 22-year-old that's walking? So I would say just get started with people around you and just gather people and see what the Lord does. Because the kingdom of God is built, person by person, not church by church.
Yeah, I mean, that's so good. I love the way that you put that. And I know what comes to mind is the phrase that Greg Koukl often uses is bloom where you're planted, and just where
Totally.
does God have you and just flourish at that place, not saying, well, if I get to there, then I will do this, saying, no, what has God placed in front of you right now? That's good. So,
That's
there's a
so
lot of
good, right?
kids, right? Growing up, a lot of kids, they want to either be a professional athlete or they want to work with professional athletes. That was me. I knew
Yeah,
I didn't
of
have the
course.
skill to play professional baseball. And so therefore I was going to be the athletic trainer. I was going to be the guy that run out on the field when they get
Yeah.
injured and, some way to work with athletes. So I'm kind of curious to hear the story of how do you even get your foot in the door to become a chaplain for an NFL team like the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, man, that's so funny. I literally get an email, tweet, DM, text message once a week saying, "How did you, how'd you get that job, and how do I become an NFL chaplain?"
Yeah.
Here's the thing, like there's no application process for the area that I'm in, or really in pro sports. There's not like the team's not going to put out this. It's not going on Indeed.com and saying, "Hey, throw your resumes in." But again, I think it's the idea of bloom where you're planted. Do what's in front of you. For me, it was, man, I was just doing college athletes. I served with Athletes in Action. I got some dear friends that serve with FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and they just do what's in front of them. And I think year after year, you think the people that you connect with, the people that you see, and literally, it's the hand of God. Like I never, like Ryan. I remember I was standing on the sidelines of, I think it was training camp, like my first or second year. And I remember thinking, like, dude, what am I doing here? Like, how did I get here? I was born in Iran and I grew up Muslim. How in the world am I standing on the sideline of this like NFL preseason football game, And for me, it was like I was serving faithfully at Colorado State University, my alma mater. I was, reaching out, doing some stuff at CU and UNC. We had a staff, and for us in Athletes in Action, we have a pro director that oversaw. He doesn't oversee all the chaplains, but he's very well connected within the NFL. And so the person in the NFL who kind of works with, this area that chaplaincy might be under, and they're really close. And so different teams, when they need a chaplain, he'll just hear about it. And, he just gave me a call, and it was a God thing because he actually called me. Well, we'd been friends. So he called me right when I resigned from my church just to say hi. And then when I told him I resigned, it was like, hey, would you be interested in this? And at the time, the Broncos role just wasn't a good fit for me. But a couple of years later, they came back and said, hey, the player development guy, my supervisor, my boss, he played at Colorado State. He'd heard about me. I've known him. He's a legend. And sometime we just kind of connected, and he brought me in, and I didn't even know it was a tryout. He just said, hey, we're in between chaplains. I need someone to do a Bible study for the team. This was during OTA, so during like their spring ball. And I went in totally just a one-off, didn't know much. Right before camp started, he gave me a call, said, hey, would you come in and just connect with the head coach and just seeing if you might be a good fit to be our chaplain? I walked in the head coach's office at the time, terrified. I mean, like terrified, right? So I walk into the head coach's office, and he's talking about, hey, I'm excited to have you here, and I'm going to ask you for prayer requests. And I remember leaving that meeting, and I looked over at the player development guy. I was like, dude, did I just get the job? And he said, I think you just did, So really, man, it was just a hand of God. And to be honest, like I'm a volunteer. Like I'm a guest in that organization. I don't work for the team. We're missionaries with Athletes in Action and crew. And it's just one of the opportunities I have to share the gospel with a group of people that really I love, and they need it.
Yeah. Well, I love that story because, as you mentioned, you get so many messages talking about how do I do this? And really the answer is you be faithful where you're at, and opportunities come along. And rather than, here's all, I'm just going to wait till I get my application in, so to speak. Now, I know with being a missionary and different things and just trying to, my ministry with students, really needing to understand the people that you are ministering to in a unique way, allowing to better connect with that kind of people group. And so my dad commented in with the question here. Let me make this smaller or something. Oh, that's not going to work. Anyways, asking the question, do athletes have any kind of unique challenges to their faith that the rest of us maybe don't have? Or do you find that they kind of struggle or have very similar challenges? I mean, I'm sure, this idea of, being superstars, being in the spotlight, having some of them maybe more money than they know what to do with. How do these kind of differences maybe present some challenges or similarities in how you do ministry?
Totally. Well, I'll say a 24-year-old man is a 24-year-old man, so there's a lot of the same struggles. It doesn't matter if you have money or don't have money, if you're an athlete, not an athlete. Ryan, I remember my first year, it was our first training camp, and I walked in, and there was one athlete that I'd known from his college days in Athletes in Action, and he was at a camp that I'd known. And man, I remember he was just one of the only players I knew, and I saw him in the cafeteria, and it was training camp, and he was fighting for a job. And I just asked him, I was like, hey bro, how you doing? And he just looks at me, and I was like he didn't start crying, but I could tell tears were welling up. And he's like, I'm in pain. I'm injured. And he's like, I can't tell anybody because if I do, they won't let me play. And if I don't play, I could get cut. This is my job. And then the head coach literally walked right by us in that car, and he just stopped talking. And Ryan, I think that's when I just sat there and I was like, oh my word, dude, you're just a 24-year-old kid trying to figure out life, and just like any other 24-year-old. And so I would say there's some just normal challenges that anyone's trying to figure out. But at the same time, and I say this all the time, I think the most unique thing about working with athletes is their worth is so wrapped up in what they do. Ryan, just think about this. Imagine every single thing that you do on the field, off the field, every play, every rep, every workout in the gym. I mean, there's cameras watching you do your bench press, and your entire worth and everything is evaluated by how much value can you add to this team or this organization. And if we just don't think you add value, then you're gone. And it's not that they even just keep the best players. They keep the best combination of players. And so you might be a better player, but they're going to cut you just because they need this for whatever. So their whole worth is literally tied up in their whole identity, and their worth is tied up in their performance. Yeah. And I mean, I just think about could you imagine your whole worth being wrapped up in how well you do or how poor you do? I find myself coming back to that theme of your identity is based on what Christ has done and who Christ says you are, not what other people say you are. And I don't think that's totally unique to athletes. I would say that there's a lot of people that wrestle
Yeah,
with their performance-based life. But
absolutely.
for athletes, man, it is just magnified, like literally magnified. And then, like, dude, they make a mistake, and then you got 55,000 people on Twitter saying bad things about them. Like,
Yeah.
that's unique, like that's not. And so I think those are some of the things. And so I've had to literally counsel some of my players, like, bro, you need to cut off Twitter right now. Like, give me your
Mm,
password. Let's just get off it for the season because it's not helping you right now.
yeah. Yeah, that I mean that it just makes so much sense. I mean, there's so many people that their job is their identity, or their kids. We wrap our identity up in so much, but that is one unique thing is it's hard. We don't deal with that backlash
Mhm.
over decisions.
Yeah,
I struggle sometimes with just a few negative comments I get from my very small viewers
yeah,
here on YouTube. But to have hundreds of thousands or so many people watching, and maybe tens of thousands commenting on that bad
yeah,
pass or that drop ball, and they cost you whatever, like, man,
yeah.
it's got to be so difficult. So how do you go about sitting down with these guys and helping reframe their identity
Mhm.
as being in Christ rather than in their performance and what everybody else is saying about them?
Yeah, I think the first thing that's important for me to do is build trust because, like, they don't have anybody really in their life that doesn't want something from them. Like, everyone always wants something, or they're
Yeah.
suspicious. What do you want from me? And I'll be honest, actually, as in ministry as a pastor, a lot of them have had pastors like try to not extort money, but really try to ask for money and a lot of stuff. So there's always this wall, even like, okay, what do you want from me, chaplain? And I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, I don't want a thing from you. There was one player we had who really struggled his first couple of years. I mean, literally anytime there was a penalty or something, everyone was booing. It was sad. It was just horrible. And I remember sitting in front of him, and he's just got like tears in his eyes, like, dude, I don't know I'm miserable. And I said, I know, bro, I know. And I think the one thing I just told him was like, bro, I just want you to know I love you. I really honestly do. I think you're a great man. I think you're a great husband, father. Like, dude, you are doing well in life. I hate that this is happening to you. Um, I think one of the things I don't do is I really don't try to throw cliches. I don't try to throw the Christian, hey, whatever, it's just a very heartfelt, man, this sucks right now. And to be honest, I'll just be transparent with you, bro. This is my fifth season. The last 4 years we have not had the greatest seasons. And so it's been a lot of walking with people through, like, just the grind of just being like, just show up day after day, show up day after day, show up day after day. And that's kind of the best thing. So I would say the number one thing I do, especially with their worth and their identity, is help them see that they are worth something, and having somebody tell them, dude, I value you, even when your vocation or your coach or the media or the fans or your family or somebody else has turned on you. It's showing that consistency and just pointing them back to scripture, but even embodying that, saying, I'm here for you and
Yeah.
you can count on me to be here.
Yeah, so you talk about that one player and kind of affirming him and him being a great husband, and makes me kind of curious. And maybe two questions here, maybe disconnected a little bit. But one is for you. What does your schedule look like during seasons? Are you traveling with the team to
Yeah.
away games, or are you just doing home games when they're in town?
Yeah, so different NFL teams have different organizations, have different people doing different things. For me, I travel. Pre-COVID, it was like maybe one, two, maybe three. I think one season I did three, but away games. But most of what I do all the home game chapels. I've got a day during the week that I go down to do a team Bible study for guys that are interested in that. And then there's another day where they allow me to come and just kind of, have lunch in the cafeteria and just be visible. And if a
Yeah,
guy needs a chat or something, so the team sees, hey, that's a value. We want our athletes to be taken care of. There's a phenomenal, there's a doctor of psychology who's there, and, sports performance person and all this stuff. And I'm just one other person that comes in from the outside to serve them. My wife does lead a study, a group for the wives and girlfriends and
yeah,
fiancés of the players, the
awesome.
significant others. And so she does that. And so she leads that with the ladies. And we've actually started a couple of years ago. We actually do the same study. And so
Okay,
there's a ministry called PAO, Pro Athlete Outreach, who kind of does a lot of stuff. They put out a Bible study for people in the NFL, and they have a ladies study and a men's study. And the cool thing is, the men and the ladies, like, we'll both be studying First John, and it's a little bit different context, men and women, but it's all based on life in the NFL. So we use, some of those illustrations. But it's kind of cool for the men to be able to say, hey, we studied First John 1:5. What'd you all talk about? So that's something my wife and I kind of do together, but we're actually doing it separately.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, kind of interested to hear kind of what, again, like your life looks like kind of during season, but then also as you commented about this one player being a husband, what is it like for these guys? Like, I'm sure it's a busy schedule. Maybe when have a home game, they're sleeping at home at least, so they're not on the road maybe as much as other sports often are.
Yeah.
But how do some of these guys balance family life and then life on the road as a professional athlete?
Yeah. So the one thing, it's completely different than baseball, basketball, hockey. Like, road games are like you're gone for a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not gone for weeks at a time. Now, when it's football season, it's football season. And they get one day off a week. So that's the NFLPA. It's a requirement. They get one day off, completely off. Some of them might have to go in to get treatment if they're injured and stuff. So that's kind of family day, kind of stuff
Okay.
they do with their families. But every night, they're going home. But here's the thing: like, it's a job, it's work, and you actually hear that's very strategic. They are taught, as they come in as rookies, hey, this is a job, and you treat it like a job. You're a professional. We don't, if you're not going to do this in a cubicle working at HP or IBM or whatever, we're probably not going to do it in the locker room either. Now it's a little bit different because you have different dynamics, but it's their vocation. I mean,
Yeah.
it's how they look at it. It's picking up my briefcase, my lunch pail, and it's a blue collar job. We see it as all the glitz and glam and all of that. And here's something funny, Ryan. Like, I noticed this in my couple of years doing this role. Like what we see on TV, like all the glitz, the glamour, the fireworks, the music, the stars. You don't see any. I mean, really, on the field, you don't see that. Like, they go, they do their warm ups, they do their stretching, they do their warm ups. They're in the locker room. They probably run out to fireworks, some music playing in the stadium, but they're totally oblivious to, like, all the Monday Night Football and all. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's literally their job. It's not what we see on TV.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely, all the stuff that's added for us and our entertainment, our
Yeah,
enjoyment that you just don't even see or are aware of on the field. Absolutely. I remember, many times playing, college baseball and all this music is playing in the background. I'll be like, oh, there's like music playing. I wasn't
yeah,
even aware of it. You're so locked in or zoned
totally,
in of what's going on
totally.
around you. And so, okay, so kind of coming back a little bit to kind of how you're approaching these guys, there's a few different kind of questions that are kind of similar but different. First one here of you talked about kind of walking up to that player who looked like he was just maybe having a tough time there in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
So my dad's kind of asking something that goes along with that of, do you approach athletes that kind of you see are struggling or you see are having a hard time? Or are you more so waiting for them to come to you?
Yeah, it's kind of I sit back. I do sit back and wait for them to come to me. I mean, the reason I went up to this athlete is because I knew him. I knew him from college, and
Mm.
so I have a relationship with him. And that's kind of, a lot of our AI Athletes in Action Network or FCA network. When a guy comes to the Broncos, especially during draft day or free agency, I'll get some text messages. Hey, I'm so and so, chaplain of the Georgia Bulldogs or whatever team. Make sure you connect with this
Mm.
guy. I've been working with him in college, so I try to make those kinds of connections. And we some of us NFL chaplains, we go to some different events like the Senior Bowl. Like, I go to the Senior Bowl, and so I met a lot of the players at the Senior Bowl,
Okay.
facilitated Bible studies and chapels at the Senior Bowl, hoping to, like, catch them. And there's actually one player that came to the Broncos that actually met at the Senior Bowl. So I don't do I again, it's their place of work. I'm
Yeah.
not cold calling, just stopping up. I
Makes
sit
sense.
back. They know when Bible study is. They know when chapel is. Now, if I see them at chapel and I have a little bit more, I think, of an opportunity to walk up and say, "Hey, bro, saw you at chapel. How are you doing?"
Yeah.
But really, again, this is their job. This is their place of work. I'm a guest, and if I wouldn't do it as a guest in someone's house, I'm not going to do it in their locker room.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you kind of, I want to highlight, you have, I think, a new podcast, right? That you just kind of started.
Yeah.
that it is you and other sports chaplains from both college and professional sports kind of talking about what goes on there. And so you kind of shared a little bit about the connection. Like if the chaplain at Georgia has a player that's coming to the Broncos, he might connect you. So kind of what does that chaplain network look like of you guys all kind of working together for the broader kind of sports world? And maybe, you give a little plug for your podcast as well for those who are
Yeah,
interested in
dude.
learning more about this.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Yeah, so I mean, the Chaplain Network, there isn't a lot of organization to it, and those are some things I've dreamed about. It's like, man, what would it look like to actually have like a football chaplains network
Hmm.
of chaplains that are connected, college, pro. I mean, all three levels. I mean, Division One, Two, Three, NAIA, Canadian, XFL, whatever FLs out there going to start up. Um,
They're always trying.
they're always trying, something, but really it's who it's who knows who. And, so I didn't even know. I mean, some of these chaplains that called me, I didn't never met them before, but they got my name from so-and-so, or this person gave them this number. But within the NFL, like we have a group me, there's a group me of all us NFL chaplains. And when someone like, I just called our guy down in Houston, there's two of our players, or one of our players and his spouse are now down with the Texans. I got on the phone last night and I was like, Chap is the pastor, is the chaplain who's been there. Greg Tyler. I was like, Chap, you got to connect with this guy. Like he will be your most faithful, like champion in the locker room. Your wife's got to connect with her. She will be faithful in women's study. And so that always helps when someone's getting traded or free agency or whatever, is calling up a chap and say, hey, make sure you connect with this person. But that's pretty vital. That's just to make sure. And to be honest, that's why I like this PAO study I told you about, man, because this, like, one player came to us from the Cowboys. They were doing the study. So literally it was like he was doing week 3 of the Bible study in Dallas. Week 4, he was with us. He just picked right up where he was, so
Yeah.
that's kind of a cool little thing that we're able to do.
Yeah, that's
The
awesome.
podcast. Thanks for plugging the
Yeah.
podcast. Podcast is called Inside the Chapel. It's actually a Sports Spectrum product, and Sports Spectrum is an online and print magazine highlighting the world of sport, athletes, and coaches sharing the gospel. And so it's a podcast that I host with my friend Icky Soma. He's the chaplain of the Houston Rockets, and we kind of tease because Jason Romano is the one who produces our podcast. He used to produce Mike and Mike, the old ESPN show. Yeah. And so we tease and we're like, bro, you went from Mike and Mike to Icky and Reza. And so, I mean, basically all it is it's a teaching podcast. And so we have asked chaplains to record their chapel talk that they're giving to their teams. And so we just kind of introduce it. We hear the chapel talk as if, they're given to their teams in whatever context. Then we just kind of talk about some application points together. We've had some great guests. We had George Gregory, the LA Chargers chaplain, and Kent Chevalier, Pittsburgh Steelers, and then Sarah Roberts, who she is the Oklahoma Sooners softball chaplain who just won the national championship. She did a phenomenal job. So it's just great hearing from all these different chaplains and kind of how they talk about their sport. And here's the interesting thing, and this is, I think, something that surprises a lot of people. We don't talk about sports. Like, we're not a rah-rah person.
Okay.
So yeah, I might use sports analogies, but it's the gospel. It's not, hey, here are 5 keys to winning the game in the name of Jesus. It's, hey, this is, when I do, it's like, hey, we're breaking down John chapter 3, verse 1 through 16, we're, so it really is, it's their only time that they can gather in a teaching type environment, because they can't go to church on Sundays. They're kind of busy on Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So one of my coworkers today was asking me kind of what it looks like for you as far as trying to reach the non-Christian players. And you kind of said that you kind of sit back a little bit. And so I'm kind of curious, if there's things that you kind of do to try to reach out, or if it really is just them kind of knowing what's going on as far as, but then also from maybe the player standpoint. So what about these solid Christian guys who are in the locker room? Are they, do they feel kind of confident, or is it kind of similar to maybe some of us in a workplace, in a secular workplace? We're like, hey, I'm a Christian, but I'm not necessarily going and sharing Christ with all my coworkers in the lunchroom. Maybe I'm just there and available if they want to come talk to me. So what does that look like as far as teammates and you really trying to make an impact on those non-Christian players?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're always trying to influence people, sharing the gospel, have them understand who Jesus is. For me, like, I want to empower and strengthen and disciple my core disciples and let them reach out and live a life of reaching out and sharing the gospel with other people. And so, yeah, I mean, there's some of that happens in the locker room. There's lots of conversations that happen. But again, I want to stress, just being appropriate in the work environment. And, typically, there's obviously no cold walking up to somebody, but man, it's like if there's a player who's walking their faith and something's going to happen, like something is going to happen, especially in the NFL. There's going to be an injury. There's going to be a frustration. There's going to be a contract year coming up. There's going to be something. And so how are, the people that I really work with and disciple and mentor, man, just how they carry themselves will influence other people as they look at that person and be like, man, I saw that guy in his contract year and he really seemed to have a lot of peace. And I got to figure out what that peace is about. And so a lot of it's situational stuff in football, but even, I'll be honest, a lot of it is through the spouses, the significant others. A lot of those ladies, they come into a city, they literally don't know anybody. And so especially if they have kids, they're typically just home, home with their kids. They might go to the gym and grocery store here and there, but they're not working 40 hours a week. So they don't usually have a lot of community. So when those ladies are able to meet together in Bible study, you can be sure that they're like, okay, my husband's better come to, that Bible study. So,
Yeah.
um,
Have you seen some pretty cool like fruit and transformation? Or most of the guys that you're working with, like they were Christians when they got drafted, or have you really seen kind of the network of both the players and the chaplains, maybe with the Broncos or other teams, really kind of doing some really cool work and seeing players come to Christ through this ministry?
yeah, no, I've definitely seen him. I remember, one guy came to Bible study one time, and it was hilarious. We were going through the Sermon on the Mount that year in Bible study, and basically just started. I think it was maybe week 2 or 3, and we were talking about being salt and light. What does it mean to be salt and light? And it's one of the first things Jesus mentions. And we were wrapping up Bible study, and I always say, hey, what's one takeaway for everybody? So we're going around, and one person gives a takeaway, and he's like, man, I just feel like sometimes we're a bright light and sometimes we're a dim light. And the closer we are to Jesus, the brighter we are a light. And I was like, dude, that's actually pretty good. Like, good job. And then the next person was like, I can't believe you just said that. He goes, first of all, I'm not a Christian. And he's like, I don't even know why I'm here. Honestly, I never go to Bible study. And he was a rookie at the time. And he's like, my whole life, my whole dream was to make it to the NFL. And he goes, I'm here. He goes, I signed a contract. I'm making more money than I know what to do with. And he's like, but I just feel empty still. And I figured I should just come to Bible study. So we get that. I mean, you do get a lot of that. And so, he became a Christian and met with him on a weekly basis even in the off season. He would stick around here for the off season. And, one off season last year before COVID, we met weekly in the off season, and we walked through the whole Gospel of Mark in that whole off season together. So yeah, so there's just things that happen, and a lot of people, some people come to chapel because it's a lucky rabbit's foot, and in their mind they're like, dude, if I go to chapel, then maybe I'll play better in the game. And I'm like, great, as long as they come and they can hear the word. And I pray that their heart is the heart that receives the seed without thorns and thistles or being hard or all that stuff, and pray for God to till the soil. I don't care what brings them into chapel.
Right.
I just want the word of God to take root in their heart.
Yeah. And if they pray to win the game, so long as the chaplain on the other side doesn't pray to win the game, you guys gotta.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
So I had someone write in, curious as far as does the NFL put any kind of restrictions on what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to talk about, or do you kind of have free reign, like this is your time and you get to say what you want, or is that maybe by team? How does that work?
Yeah, man, I think we, again, what we do is completely voluntary. It's not a requirement. When athletes are coming in, I'm sharing the gospel. I'm sharing the biblical principles of what does it mean to live life, and what does life look like, and relationships, and handling your money well, and living in the name of Jesus. And beware of, walk your walk, don't just talk it. Reap what you sow, or you're going to reap what you sow. God can't be mocked. I mean, I have free reign to talk about whatever I want, but at the same time, I've got to be really strategic as well. Because if you think about it, I am pastoring a group of about 53 players, let's say 65 players with the practice squad, and at, let's say, I don't know, 30 or so coaches or support staff. So I've got a if you think of it this way, I'm pastoring like 80, 85 people, but I've only got 8 or 9 times I can speak to them a year. I only get 8 or 9 chapels a year. I get,
Yeah.
so I get, and so it's like, because I don't do all the away game chapels. We have other people in those cities that do them. And so I got to be really strategic. Like, okay, what to me is the most important principles that I just want them to understand about life? Most important principle I want them to understand about Jesus, about what it means to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, every year I'm hitting the same kind of principles. Like, how do I know the scripture is reliable? What does it even mean to read the Bible? How do you pray? What is prayer? And so it's just that picture of like I've got to make it digestible for somebody that knows nothing about
Right.
Jesus. I mean, I talked about Daniel in the lion's den, and literally someone was like, I heard of that story. I had no idea it was in the Bible. And so like I got to be able to communicate to that person.
Right.
And my one of my players that I'm like, bro, next off season, let's take a seminary class together.
Yeah.
And so I have free reign, but I also got to be really strategic
Yeah.
in what I talk about, because I only got 8 or 9 shots to
Yeah.
invest in these men.
Yeah. So you mentioned talking about the reliability of the Bible, and obviously my focus being a lot on Christian apologetics. I'm curious, kind of how much does that play into it, or is it more like, hey, these are Christian guys, and you're really digging into Scripture, or really guys maybe coming to you with questions and challenges? How do I understand this, or how do I know this is real? How do I know Jesus actually rose from the dead? How much maybe apologetics is involved in what you're doing?
I think because of who I am, and I have an apologetics bent too, and becoming starting to follow Jesus after being a Muslim. It's a natural part of how I teach,
Mm.
So even as I
Yeah.
teach, and you do this really well, as Ryan, like for example, if I'm teaching out of John, I might say, hey, the Gospel of John was written by a guy. His name was John, one of the disciples that walked with Jesus. The way that we have this in our hand right now is, there was a manuscript that was written. And actually, by the way, we got over 5,000 original manuscripts of the New Testament that have been found. So I just say those kinds of things. And as I'm teaching on a passage, because again, I only got 8 or 9 shots with
Right.
somebody. I do want them to have confidence. Oh, that's how we got the Bible, or this is how I know that Jesus rose from the dead. I'm not going to do an apologetics talk for one of my chapels, but with my core team, like my core disciples, especially in the off season, we can really dive into some of that stuff and
Yeah.
really dive in and be like, hey, let's figure out how to defend our faith.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's different movements, that are moving, through the world of sport. Black Hebrew Israelites are, that's all over, the world of sports right now. And so just helping equip our athletes, to understand the core principles of what it means to follow Jesus.
Yeah. So yeah. So man, I don't know how long ago it was, but obviously, a lot of people know the name like a Tim Tebow, right? Who was quarterback there
Mm-hmm.
with the Denver Broncos for a while. And some of these other athletes who are very outspoken, very kind of bold Christians. And I'm kind of curious when it comes to them, like, I'm sure that they're not the only Christians, right? You're probably mentoring other people that
Yeah.
maybe, you don't obviously don't have to drop names, but there's probably a lot of players that maybe we don't know that they're Christians, that
Mm-hmm.
are really just living kind of behind the scenes. And so I'm kind of curious as far as that perspective of these guys that are just kind of faithfully following Christ and are not public
Yeah.
about it versus these guys that are super outspoken and public. Kind of what does that look like as far as kind of the believers that you're kind of working with in these different contexts?
Totally. Like, yeah, that's a great question. I tease my good friend Maurice. Maurice Williams is the chaplain for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm like, especially this offseason, like, bro, you hit the jackpot. You got Urban Meyer, you got Trevor Lawrence, you got Tim Tebow. Like, come on, man. Like, you hit the ministry, the ministry trifecta there. Um, but yeah, dude, there are so many that are just quiet. And a lot of these guys are just quiet in their life. They they're famous because they play football. None of them wanted to be famous. They just love to play football and they just love to be on a team. And one of the principles, and I'm so glad I learned this from a mentor a while ago, is, especially talking about that salt and light in the Sermon on the Mount, like salt works best when it's invisible. And I say that to my guys all the time. We as chaplains talk about that a lot. Salt works best when it's invisible. Because if you know there's salt in your food, the food doesn't taste good. But if the salt is invisible in your food, it actually brings out the flavor of the food. And so, for a lot of the guys who come to chapel, like they're not going to be and Tebow's phenomenal. Like Tim's a great guy. I love what he's done for the kingdom. I love how outspoken he is. He's wonderful. But there's people that are making just as big of an impact, quietly going about their life, influencing their teammates, faithfully loving their wives, influencing the communities that we'll never know about, and that's okay, and that's completely okay.
Yeah. So with these different guys, whether you're talking about the Trevor Lawrence or the Tim Tebows, and maybe the really outspoken, all the way down to the guys that we have no idea that they're even believers, is it? Would you say like is it difficult for them to use their platform for Christ? Is it easy for them to do? Kind of, or is it just really depend on kind of the person on what it's like being kind of that NFL player and then going out and standing up for Christ?
Yeah, I don't think it's any different for them. I think it's the same. It would be for you and me, going out doing this, or there's always this idea of how am I going to be received, or what are people going to think about me. They do a ton of work, especially a lot of guys do a ton of work in the hometowns they're from. They'll put on a football camp and they'll go back to their hometown, do a football camp, a free camp for the kids in that community. That's a huge movement within the NFL. And as a matter of fact, their agents actually help them set all this up. Yes, it's good for marketing deals and all of that, but it's a way for them to actually like invest back in their communities. And yeah, I mean, oftentimes at these places, there's a player praying or a player sharing their testimony, and so it's not hard, for these guys to be able to share their faith. Um, but it's also not easy because again, they might talk about Jesus one time and get a personal foul for unnecessary roughness because they lost their temper, and now everyone's making fun of them, saying, "Oh, I thought you were a Christian." So that's just the world that they live in. They're under the
Yeah.
microscope quite a bit.
Yeah. So, with that being kind of under the microscope, I'm just kind of curious on what advice might you be able to share to us fans who are watching professional sports. We obviously talked about, what we say on Twitter about these people, but, I think of even of what happened with, Simone Biles or, these different athletes who
Yeah,
either stepped down for whatever, the reasons that she stated, or the athlete who goes out there and fumbles the ball in the championship game. I think
yeah,
like Tony Romo dropping the snap, or those kind of
yeah,
things. Like, what can we as fans do to I don't know, just to to speak into their lives? I mean, they're
yeah.
distant, but there's what can we do to be better? As far as kind of what you see from that side, I don't know. Not that we're always
Yeah,
bad, but I know that we're very hard on
yeah,
athletes. It
Lyle.
just happens. I mean, I'm a baseball umpire. It's so easy for fans to just hurl things at me, and it's like, would you actually say that to my face? I don't think you would.
That's
But the
it.
fact that the fact
That's
that
it.
I'm on a field and you're sitting in the stands, you feel like anything goes. Or the
I
fact
know.
that you're behind a screen and you don't actually know me, anything goes. And so I'm just kind of curious, like from seeing their perspective, are there any insights that maybe you can share that can kind
Oh,
of shed
bro.
light into how we can be better as fans?
Yeah, you're either gonna get me fired or make my ministry supporter stop supporting our ministry. Um, I think like, dude, if you're not gonna say it to their face, don't say it. That's the one thing. Like, man, if you're gonna cuss out Von Miller because he missed a touchdown, like, I don't think you do that like to his face first and foremost, or he missed a tackle. But no, I think remembering, dude, these are human beings, and they're mostly in their 20s. Like, think back to when you were in your 20s. That's what these guys are. I mean, a lot of them are in their 20s. They're trying to figure out life. Um, they play sports, and they play sports. There is this weird like feeling of like, oh, I bought my ticket. I'm a paying fan. I'm a season ticket holder. I'm paying that guy's salary. No, you're not, dude. You're paying the rental of that stadium that you bought the ticket in, and all the TV money is what's paying their salaries. I think that's just a reality. But I think there is this entitlement of like, I'm paying for to see this so I can say whatever I want. And I think just remembering like, dude, these are image bearers. Like they've been created in the image of God, and they may not meet your expectation, but that's no reason to boo them. Um, and Ryan, I remember like my first season, I'll never forget this. I use this illustration all the time, so please forgive me if it goes a little long. I remember we were 3-1, first place in the AFC West. We were playing the 0-4 Giants on Sunday Night Football. And man, it was going to be like we just lost the week before. We're going to get on track. We're playing the 0-4 Giants, Sunday Night Football, tens of millions of people watching. Game starts and literally everybody's cheering. Team runs out on the field. Man, we first quarter didn't go good. Second quarter went worse. We're down like something like 28-0, like going into halftime. And like, dude, the whole stadium is booing as our team is running into the locker room. And I was like, dude, just 90 minutes ago, you guys were cheering these guys, but because they didn't meet your expectations, you're booing them. And I remember having that conversation. We had Bible study on Mondays that year, and just having that conversation at Bible, like that's what we talked about at Bible study, was like, you can't allow the cheers or the boos of people to help you determine your self-worth. Like you just can't do that. And so I think that'd be my biggest advice, Ryan, is just remember, first of all, they're humans. They're created in the image of God. They're 20-year-olds playing a game, and they're doing the best they can. Yeah. And nobody is missing a throw. Nobody is, whatever, because they want to do bad. It's not because they suck. They're literally the best in the world. And so, I would just say have some grace.
Oh,
and for
goodness.
The refs too. And for the refs.
Dude,
I'll be honest, dude, my secret dream job is to be an NFL referee. I would love to be an NFL referee. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm either a glutton for punishment or a control freak, one of the two.
Yeah, man. No, I shared this story before on here that I finished this one game and it ended with a very close call. Bang, bang play at first base, called the kid out. The better team lost. I'm filling up my water bottle at the snack stand, and this random guy walks up to me and goes, you're a terrible umpire. And I was like, oh, thanks, man. He goes, you're a garbage umpire. You made a garbage call. You don't even deserve your paycheck. Oh. And I went, wow, I appreciate that. And then he says, and you're a horrible person too. And I went, well, it takes a kind person to say something like that. And I wanted to be like, well, I actually hope that your employer continues to pay you and you make mistakes. Like, and like,
oh my word.
To wish like someone could not earn a living because they made a call that you don't like. And I went to my partner. I'm like, did I really blow that call? He goes, dude, if you would have called him safe, the other team would have been all over. It's one of those calls. And it's just like, man, totally. It's just crazy. And it's like, we had actually the head guy of the tournament ended up had like threatened to kick him out and be like, you can't come to any more games if you keep this up, dude. You got to leave. And it's like, he should have been. It just blows my mind, some of the things that we say. And it's like, but it is hard, right? I hear this all the time of like, well, they're paid millions of dollars and for the purpose of entertainment. They are entertainers. Yeah. They're supposed to entertain. At the same time, I think there's ways of being like, yeah, you're an entertainer. Yeah. You're playing a game and getting paid lots of millions, but you still are a person, and kind of keeping that right perspective.
Ryan, we went through a coaching change a couple of years ago, and it was like sickening how people would talk about the coach on like Facebook or in the stadium. And it's almost like, oh, he's making millions of dollars. He's fine. And I'm like, dude, his 12-year-old daughter is not going to be fine when she has to go to her third school in 5 years, like stop being a jerk. And that's the thing. Like, it's interesting because we say that like, oh, money is not everything, but we feel like we can mistreat somebody just because they make a lot of money. And that's just not right, man. That's my biggest pet peeve. I do not like going to the stadium because I don't like fans.
Yeah.
They're just mean sometimes.
Dude, so true. But my goodness, professional sports, man, it's fun, but it's hard not to get into that attitude. It's hard. Mm-hmm. Like even for me, like I'll be sitting there and umpire's making bad calls and I feel like I have a better way in which I can talk to him, how I would want to be talked to. And I was an umpire, like, totally. But at the same time, it's like, when someone yells like, dude, you blew that. I'm like, I know I did. Like, I know if I miss a call, like I know I missed the call and I feel horrible. And then to lay that on,
So Ryan, I've got a 11-year-old boy who loves to play baseball. And I have to it's interesting because he's in a place right now where he's like, oh, that umpire made or when they lose, that umpire was terrible. And I'm like, and I say this all the time. I was like, buddy, umpires don't make you lose games. Like we lost the game. And I've coached his team before, and I was like, dude, we lost. It shouldn't have come down to the umpire's call. We blew this play, this play, this play, this play. And but even my like 11-year-old son, who for some reason there's something in us that we want to blame somebody else for something bad that happens. And I'll say this, for athletes, sports can become an idol. Dude, for fans, it become an idol too. And I think one of the reasons fans get so riled up is because their identity is wrapped up in the Denver Broncos. Like, man, the Denver Broncos go well, I'm doing well because I'm their fan. Denver Broncos don't, for some reason, they think, man, there's something, wrong with me or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have a few minutes left, and so I'd love for you to just kind of speak into one last area. Is there's probably, we've talked some about, the athletes who maybe are listening and some things there, but also there's probably going to be some parents listening who are raising athletes, who are coaching that 11-year-old baseball team. What would you say kind of in the last few minutes that we have to really kind of encourage and maybe equip the parents who are raising young athletes in what they can do to better focus on their identity in Christ, or some other ideas that you have that are very valuable for parents to know?
Yeah, I would say this. I would say the number one like moment or reason that kids quit sports, there's a study done by an institute. I can't remember the name. It's like youth sports something. The number one reason kids quit sports is not because it's not fun anymore. It's not because it's hard. It's not because of travel. It's the car ride home from games. It's the number one reason that kids say they quit playing sports is because all the parent does the moment the last whistle blows or the last out or whatever, all they do is they talk about everything the kid did wrong, what he could have done better, what the ref did wrong, or what the coach did wrong. Yeah. And literally I've watched it. Like I watched my kids come off the soccer field and like there's a dad like talking to his like little girl about, oh, you should have done this in that play and you should have done that in that play. You should have done this. And I just want to be like, dude, shut up and take her to ice cream. And, like go have fun. And like, that's the biggest thing. It's like, so my wife and I, we've committed to say, no matter what happens, it's not just a saying that we say, we choose to say, we tell our kids, I love to watch you play. Like I loved watching you play in that game. And I truly do. I love watching them play. And sometimes parents' identity is wrapped up in how well their kid does. And it's like, dude, my son plays on there's this, league here in town. He plays on the lowest level of that team. I could care less. Like, I'm like, sweet. That's not a lot of travel for us, but it's like, there's parents that are like mad their kids are there. And I'm like, dude, just enjoy watching your kid play. Like they're 11 years old. Like who knows what's going to happen. Dude. And so I would say that I say, tell them that you love watching them play. Don't rehash the game in the car. They don't need to hear it. And for us, like if there are some ways in which I want to help my kids, I ask permission afterwards the next day. Be like, hey, if it's okay with you, I've got some, I saw some things that I think you might be able to improve in the game. Let me know if you ever want to hear about them. And sometimes my daughter will be like, okay, I'll let you know. And I'm like, shoot, she didn't ask me. Like I was trying to trick her. I wanted her to ask me. And then sometimes she'll be like, hey, yeah, what'd you see? But it's all on her. It's all, I think, putting it on them and let them ask the questions. But man, we mess it up for our kids so much.
Like it breaks my heart. I obviously don't see the car ride home, but there have been so many times that I'm umpiring behind home plate. The kid is either the catcher or the batter, swing and a miss. And then I hear dad in the stands go, are you kidding me? Why would you swing at that? And then the kid literally turns around, looks at his dad behind and goes, Dad, just stop. And there's one time a catcher told his dad to stop. Dad made another comment and his kid turns around again and goes, Dad, stop it. Let me play. And I'm like sitting there at a home plate umpire like, dude, it's like 11-year-olds. Like,
I know.
What do you like? They're travel ball, so it's more competitive. But like, what do you do at like like this type of pressure and just these kids that are so dejected after games coming off the field after I hear what their parents are saying to them during the game, and I'm like, well, no wonder they're talking to me like this. Their kid gets it too. I can't imagine what that car ride is like.
Oh, it's horrible. Ryan, I have my 8-year-old daughter has a new soccer coach, and he's awesome. And he had a parent meeting, the first practice, and he literally said, he goes, I don't want to hear any verbs from you guys. You are not allowed to use any verbs during games or practice. And I was like, what do you mean no verbs? But like, think about it. I can't tell her to run. Can't say shoot, pass. And he is like, if you use verbs, I'm going to ask you to leave. And I was like, dude, I like you. You're a good coach. And he's like 25 years old. But that's so true. Is like, dude, parents, if we could just stop using verbs, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my
Awesome.
advice, bro.
Awesome. Well, to finish up our time, I know, Reza, we talked about the podcast you're doing, the work with the Broncos that you're doing, but I know that you also travel and do some speaking as well.
Mm-hmm.
Your website is down in the description below if those are listening on
Thanks,
YouTube.
bro.
But is there anything else kind of that you want to share as you kind of go out, just of where people can find more work that you're doing, or just connect or kind of be encouraged by your ministry or athletes in action in general?
Yeah, bro, I got to be so much better at this. I have no idea. We do have our ministry website, teamsaday.com, which tells a little bit of what we do and who we influence. But man, we just love, I would say this, I want to come back to what we started with in this, man, do what's in front of you. I think there's a lot of people that say, hey, I want to do that, or I want to do this. That sounds cool. Like, man, my job is no cooler than, I meet chaplains all the time, like prison chaplains and army chaplains and Navy chaplains, and they're telling me what they get to do. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I get 9 times to talk to some guys that maybe everyone knows who they are, but you're in the prisons with people. Like, that's pretty incredible. So I would say, just do what's in front of you. And if God gives you an assignment, do it well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Reza, thank you so much for taking this time out of your
Thanks
evening,
so much,
for
Ryan.
talking with me, my listeners, hopefully encouraging them
bro.
to just go out and continue to serve God in the place that he has called them. So thanks for joining me.
You got it, man. Thanks so much, Ryan. Sure appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right, for those listening, go check out all of Reza's info below. Check out what he is doing, all that encouraging work, as well as be good to those athletes. Encourage them. Encourage your kids and the other people that you are watching, as well as if this has been an encouraging thing to you, you want to see more of what's going on. There's lots of other interviews that are going to pop up over here that you can check out. Next week is going to be the end of the month Q&A because I'm back to school. We changed up the schedule. It's now Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where I'm just going to be answering your questions and spending that time kind of working through some of the difficult issues and challenges that you are facing. So go ahead and subscribe, like, share if you've enjoyed this. Let other people see what's going on and what Reza is doing and what's happening in the sports world. And with that, have a wonderful rest of your day. Be blessed. Continue to think deeply about God and Christianity because they are worth thinking about. Bye, everybody.